The courtroom was packed, cameras rolling, but nobody, not the plaintiff, not the audience, not even the bailiff, could have predicted what Judge Judy was about to do. Karen, a woman in her mid-40s dripping with designer accessories and an attitude to match, sat in the defendant's chair with her arms crossed and a smirk plastered across her face. She'd walked into this small claims case thinking she was untouchable, armed with excuses and an inflated sense of self-importance. Across the aisle sat the plaintiff, a small business owner who'd been stiffed on a $3,800 payment for services rendered, clutching a folder of evidence that told a story Karen couldn't talk her way out of. Judge Judy, the legendary legal titan who'd made a career out of demolishing entitled defendants, was already zeroing in on the inconsistencies in Karen's story. But when Karen realized she was losing, she did the unthinkable. She stood up, pointed her finger at Judge Judy, and shouted, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." What happened next didn't just stun Karen into silence. It became the most savage takedown in courtroom television history, and it was all caught on camera. Judge Judy picked up the phone and called the lawyer. Liv, right there, in front of everyone. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Before we dive into this absolutely jaw-dropping courtroom moment, hit that like button if you're hooked on real justice served, and subscribe to catch every unbelievable story where entitled attitudes meet reality head-on. This wasn't just a courtroom clash. It was a masterclass in how threatening the wrong person can backfire so spectacularly that millions of people would watch it unfold online. Judge Judy's response didn't just shut Karen down. It exposed her in a way that would haunt her forever. The case itself seemed straightforward, almost routine for Judge Judy's courtroom. The plaintiff, Marcus Chen, a 52-year-old contractor who ran a small home renovation business, stood at his podium with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're absolutely in the right. He was suing Karen Whitmore for $3,800, the full cost of kitchen renovation work he'd completed at her home 3 months earlier. Marcus wasn't flashy. He wore a simple button-down shirt, held a well-organized binder of documents, and spoke in measured tones. Everything about him screamed reliability, the kind of person who shows up on time, does quality work, and expects to be paid for it like any reasonable professional would. Karen, on the other hand, was a study in contrasts. She'd arrived in designer heels that clicked against the courtroom floor with an almost aggressive rhythm, carrying a handbag that probably cost more than what she owed Marcus. Her hair was styled to perfection, her makeup flawless, and she wore an expression that suggested she found the entire proceeding beneath her. From the moment she sat down, her body language screamed contempt. Arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes rolling at nearly everything Marcus said. Heavy theatrical sighs that echoed through the small courtroom whenever Judge Judy asked her to wait her turn. The audience members, seated in their usual rows behind the litigants, were already exchanging knowing glances. They'd seen this type before. Marcus presented his case with the kind of clarity that made Judge Judy lean back and listen without interruption, always a good sign for a plaintiff. He explained how Karen had contacted him through a referral, requesting a complete kitchen renovation including new cabinets, countertops, and tile work. They'd signed a contract. He showed Judge Judy the signed agreement with Karen's signature clear as day at the bottom. The work had taken 3 weeks. He'd texted her progress photos throughout, which he'd printed and organized chronologically in his binder. Karen had even texted back things like "looking great" and "can't wait to see it finished." Marcus had completed the job, done the final walkthrough with Karen, and she'd told him she was thrilled with the results. Then came time for the final payment. Silence. His calls went to voicemail. His texts were left unread. When he finally reached her, she claimed there were issues with the work. Issues she'd never mentioned during the 3 weeks he was actively in her home or during the final walkthrough. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed as she examined the contract, the text messages, and the before and after photos. "Mr. Chen, did Mrs. Whitmore ever put these alleged issues in writing?" Marcus shook his head. "No, Your Honor, and I asked her to. Multiple times. I even offered to come back and look at whatever she claimed was wrong. She refused." Judge Judy turned her attention to Karen, and that's when the real show began. Karen's version of events was a masterpiece of contradiction. She claimed the cabinets were crooked, but couldn't explain why she'd texted Marcus they look perfect on the day of installation. She insisted the tile work was sloppy, but the photos Marcus provided showed clean, professional lines that even Judge Judy acknowledged looked excellent. When Judge Judy asked why she hadn't mentioned any of these problems during the 3-week job or at the final walkthrough, Karen's answer was a classic. I was going through a very stressful time. I wasn't really paying attention to the details. Judge Judy's eyebrows shot up. You weren't paying attention to the details of a $3,800 renovation happening in your own kitchen for 3 weeks? Karen shifted uncomfortably. Well, I'm a very busy person. I run my own business. I have responsibilities. The audience could barely contain themselves. Someone in the back row let out a barely audible scoff. Judge Judy didn't miss a beat. So you're telling me you were too busy to notice problems with work you now claim was so defective you shouldn't have to pay for it? Karen's face flushed. That's not what I'm saying. Judge Judy leaned forward. Then what are you saying, Mrs. Whitmore? Karen stammered, throwing out excuse after excuse. She claimed she'd tried to contact Marcus, contradicting his phone records showing the opposite. She suggested maybe she'd paid him cash and forgotten, but couldn't produce a receipt or explain why she'd later texted him asking for more time to pay. Every answer dug her hole deeper, and Judge Judy was just warming up. The tension in the room was thick, and Karen's smirk had long since vanished, replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. Judge Judy wasn't just poking holes in Karen's story anymore. She was systematically dismantling it piece by piece, and everyone in the courtroom could see it happening in real time. Karen's confident facade was cracking like cheap paint under pressure, and the more Judge Judy pressed, the more desperate her answers became. Mrs. Whitmore, you've told me 3 different reasons why you didn't pay Mr. Chen. First, the work was defective. Then you claimed you did pay him but lost the receipt. Now you're saying you needed more time because of financial difficulties. Which is it? Judge Judy's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade, sharp and unforgiving. Karen's hands gripped the edges of her podium, her knuckles turning white. All of those things are true, Your Honor. Judge Judy tilted her head, a gesture that every regular viewer knew meant she was about to verbally eviscerate someone. All of them? At the same time. That's remarkable. The sarcasm dripped from every word. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but Judge Judy held up her hand. Let me ask you something else. You claim the work was so defective you shouldn't have to pay, but you're still using that kitchen, aren't you? You didn't have Mr. Chen come back. You didn't hire another contractor to fix these supposed problems. You're just living with this terrible defective work? Karen's jaw tightened. Well, I couldn't afford to hire someone else after spending that much money. That was the wrong answer. Judge Judy leaned forward, her eyes blazing. You spent what money? You haven't paid Mr. Chen a dime, and judging by that handbag and those shoes, I don't think money is your problem. The courtroom erupted in barely suppressed gasps and murmurs. Karen's face went from flushed to bright red. I don't appreciate your tone, Your Honor. I came here for a fair hearing, not to be attacked. It was a catastrophic mistake. Nobody, and viewers of the show knew this better than anyone, nobody tells Judge Judy what tone to use in her own courtroom. Judge Judy's expression hardened into something that could cut glass. You don't appreciate my tone? Let me tell you what I don't appreciate, Mrs. Whitmore. I don't appreciate people who waste this court's time with lies. I don't appreciate defendants who think they can have thousands of dollars of work done, and then invent excuses to avoid paying. And I especially don't appreciate entitled people who think the rules don't apply to them. Karen shot up from her chair, her composure completely shattered now. Her voice rose to match her indignation. This is ridiculous. I have rights. You can't speak to me like this. Judge Judy didn't even blink. Sit down, Mrs. Whitmore. But Karen wasn't sitting. She was standing at her full height, pointing her finger across the courtroom, her voice shaking with rage and desperation. The audience held its collective breath. Marcus stood quietly at his podium, watching the meltdown with wide eyes. The bailiff shifted his stance, ready to intervene if needed. And that's when Karen said the words that would seal her fate. Karen's finger was still pointed at Judge Judy, trembling with rage when the words exploded out of her mouth. You know what? Fine. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. My attorney is going to file a complaint about this kangaroo court and your unprofessional behavior. This isn't over! The courtroom went dead silent. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, suffocating, like the air itself was holding its breath. Marcus's eyes went wide. Audience members froze mid-gasp. The bailiff's hand moved slightly closer to Karen, anticipating he might need to escort her out. Even the cameras seemed to focus more intently, as if they knew they were capturing something extraordinary. But Judge Judy? Judge Judy did something nobody expected. She smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just been handed exactly the ammunition they needed. She leaned back in her leather chair, folded her hands calmly on the bench, and looked at Karen with an expression of pure, calculated amusement. Oh, really? Her voice was dangerously soft. Your lawyer? Karen, mistaking Judge Judy's calm for victory, puffed up her chest. Yes, my lawyer. And he's one of the best attorneys in the state. He's going to hear all about this circus. She waved her hand dismissively at the courtroom, at Judge Judy, at everything. Judge Judy nodded slowly as if considering this information very carefully. Then she leaned forward, and her next words made the entire room buzz with confused energy. Perfect. What's his name? Karen blinked, clearly not expecting this response. What? Judge Judy spoke slower, enunciating every word. Your lawyer. The one who's going to file all these complaints. What is his name? Karen hesitated for just a fraction of a second, but then her bravado returned. Robert Tillman. He's with Tillman and Associates downtown. Judge Judy's smile widened. Wonderful. Give me his phone number. The courtroom erupted in confused whispers. This wasn't normal procedure. This wasn't how these things usually went. Karen's face flickered with something that might have been doubt, but she was too far committed to back down now. What? Why? Judge Judy's voice took on that edge again, the one that made it clear she was not asking, she was commanding. His phone number, Mrs. Whitmore. You just threatened me with your lawyer. I'd like to speak with him. Right now. Karen's hands fumbled for her purse, her movement suddenly jerky and uncertain. The audience was leaning forward in their seats. Marcus looked like he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Karen pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts with shaking fingers. Okay, it's... She read off the number, her voice significantly quieter now. Judge Judy turned to her bailiff, Bird, who looked just as shocked as everyone else. Bird, get Mr. Robert Tillman on the phone, speaker. Now. The bailiff moved to the courtroom phone, and as he began dialing, Karen's face transformed from red with anger to pale with dawning horror. She'd just realized she'd made a terrible, irreversible mistake. The sound of the phone ringing on speaker filled every corner of the courtroom. Each ring felt like an eternity. Karen stood frozen at her podium, her earlier bravado evaporating with every passing second. Her face had gone from pale to almost gray, and her hands gripped the edge of the podium so tightly her fingers were shaking. Marcus watched in stunned silence, barely believing what was happening. The audience was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Judge Judy sat back in her chair, completely calm, her eyes never leaving Karen's face. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. This was about exposing someone who thought they could lie their way out of consequences. After the fourth ring, a crisp, professional voice answered. Tillman and Associates, how may I direct your call? The receptionist sounded cheerful, completely unaware she was being broadcast into a courtroom drama. Judge Judy leaned toward the microphone on her bench. Yes, this is Judge Judith Sheindlin calling. I need to speak with Robert Tillman immediately, please. There was a pause, a very long pause, and then the receptionist's voice came back, noticeably higher and more nervous. Judge Sheindlin? The Judge Judy? Judge Judy's expression didn't change. That's correct. It's urgent. Is Mr. Tillman available? The receptionist stammered something about putting her on hold, and suddenly the courtroom was filled with generic hold music. It would have been comedic if the tension wasn't so thick. Karen looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Sweat had begun to form at her hairline, ruining her perfect makeup. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. There was nothing to say. She'd dug this hole herself, and now everyone was watching her stand in it. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, the hold music cut off and a male voice came through the speaker, cautious and confused. This is Robert Tillman. To whom am I speaking? Judge Judy's voice was all business now. Mr. Tillman, this is Judge Judith Sheindlin. I'm currently in my courtroom with a defendant named Karen Whitmore, who claims you're her attorney and that you'll be filing complaints about my conduct on her behalf. Is that accurate? The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. Then Robert Tillman's voice came back, measured and professional but clearly bewildered. I'm sorry, could you repeat that name? Judge Judy obliged. Karen Whitmore. She's standing in my courtroom right now claiming you represent her. Another pause. Then the words that destroyed Karen completely. Your Honor, I don't have a client by that name. I've never represented anyone named Karen Whitmore. The courtroom exploded. Audience members gasped audibly. Someone let out a strangled laugh that was quickly stifled. Marcus's jaw literally dropped. Karen's face went through a spectacular range of emotions in about 3 seconds. Shock, horror, panic, and finally a desperate attempt to salvage something, anything, from this disaster. She started talking quickly, frantically. Well, he was my lawyer. Years ago. For my divorce! I meant... Judge Judy held up one finger, silencing her instantly, while keeping her attention on the phone. Mr. Tillman, does the name ring any bells at all? Any past representation? Tillman's response was swift and certain. No, Your Honor, I specialize in corporate law. I don't handle divorce cases, and I've never had a client named Karen Whitmore in any capacity. Judge Judy nodded as if this was exactly what she'd expected. Thank you for your time, Mr. Tillman. I apologize for the interruption. Tillman, clearly still confused but professional to the end, responded. Of course. Your Honor, Happy to help clarify. The line went dead. Judge Judy turned her full attention to Karen, and the look on her face was absolutely withering. The courtroom was buzzing with energy now, whispers flying back and forth, but Judge Judy's voice cut through it all like a knife. So, Mrs. Whitmore, you don't have a lawyer. You threatened me with an attorney who doesn't represent you, has never represented you, and doesn't even practice the kind of law you claimed he did. Do I have that right? If you're as absolutely shocked by what just happened as that entire courtroom was, smash that like button and subscribe, because Judge Judy's final verdict was about to make this legendary moment even more brutal. This wasn't just about winning a case anymore. It was about what happens when entitlement crashes headfirst into accountability. And the whole world is watching. Karen tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no coherent words came out, just stammering, fragmented attempts at explanation. I meant someone else. I was confused. This is... Judge Judy raised her hand and Karen fell silent immediately. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so completely that Karen looked like a deflated balloon, all her earlier arrogance completely gone, replaced by pure humiliation. Judge Judy's voice was cold, clinical, and absolutely devastating. Mrs. Whitmore, in my 30-plus years on the bench, I have seen every trick, every excuse, every lie that people think will get them out of paying what they owe. But threatening me with a lawyer who doesn't exist? That's a new one. She picked up Marcus's contract and the stack of evidence, holding it up. Mr. Chen did the work. You signed the contract. You approved the work during installation. You praised it in writing. And then you decided you simply didn't want to pay. When that didn't work, you made up defects that don't exist. And when I called you on it, you lied about having legal representation. Karen's eyes were welling with tears now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and embarrassment, the kind that come when someone is caught so thoroughly that there's no escape. Judge Judy continued, her tone never wavering. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $3,800 plus court costs. The gavel hadn't even come down yet, but Karen's face crumpled. But that's not fair. So the gavel cracked against the bench with finality. We're done here. And Mrs. Whitmore? Next time you want to threaten someone with legal action, make sure you actually have a lawyer first. Case dismissed. Karen stood there frozen as the courtroom processed what they'd just witnessed. The bailiff gestured for her to exit, and she stumbled away from the podium, her designer heels clicking against the floor. But this time the sound was defeated, not aggressive. Marcus walked out of the courtroom with his head held high, shaking Judge Judy's hand with genuine gratitude before leaving. He'd come for justice and gotten it, plus a front-row seat to one of the most spectacular takedowns in television history. Karen, meanwhile, practically fled from the courtroom, her face buried in her hands, refusing to speak to anyone. Her friends or family members who'd come to support her looked mortified, keeping their distance as if her humiliation was contagious. The audience filed out, buzzing with excited chatter, already pulling out their phones to tell everyone they knew about what they'd just witnessed live. But the real explosion happened online. Within 2 hours of the episode airing, the clip titled "Judge Judy Calls Karen's Lawyer Lev" had racked up over 500,000 views. By the end of the day, it was approaching 3 million. Social media platforms exploded with reactions. The comment section was absolutely ruthless. The way her face went white when the lawyer said he didn't know her, with dozens of laughing emojis. "Judge Judy really said, 'Let me call your bluff in 4K', became one of the top comments with over 200,000 likes. This is what happens when entitlement meets reality on live television, garnered thousands of shares across platforms. The hashtags #Judge Judy Calls Lawyer and #Karen vs Judge Judy trended for 3 straight days. Legal professionals jumped into the conversation, with one prominent attorney tweeting, "In 20 years of practice, I've never seen a judge do this. Unconventional? Yes, absolutely legendary. Also yes." Even lawyers who'd never watched the show were sharing the clip, using it as a teaching moment about what not to do in court. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines like, "Judge Judy's most savage moment yet," and "Defendant's lawyer threat backfires spectacularly." Morning talk shows played the clip, with hosts and guests alike marveling at Judge Judy's tactical brilliance. Late-night comedians had a field day, with one host joking, "Note to self, if you're going to threaten Judge Judy with your lawyer, maybe make sure you actually have one first." The cultural impact went even deeper. The moment became a rallying cry against entitled behavior, shared in workplace group chats and family text threads as the ultimate example of accountability. Memes flooded the internet featuring Karen's face at the exact moment the lawyer said he didn't know her, captioned with variations of, "When lying catches up to you." The phrase "you'll be hearing from my lawyer" became an instant punchline, commented under any video where someone was clearly in the wrong but acting righteous. Judge Judy's reputation, already legendary, reached new heights. Think pieces were written about her no-nonsense approach to justice and why it resonated so deeply with audiences. The episode became one of the most watched in the show's history, with reruns pulling in massive numbers every time it aired. As for Karen, she became an unwitting symbol of what happens when you underestimate accountability. Whether she ever paid Marcus the $3,800 plus court costs became a matter of public speculation, with many hoping the answer was yes, and that the humiliation taught her something valuable about honesty and consequences. If this incredible moment of justice and accountability shows you exactly why Judge Judy remains an absolute legend, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss another unbelievable courtroom showdown. Drop a comment below and tell us what you would have done if you were the lawyer getting that call. Would you have been as professional as Robert Tillman? Or would you have had some words for Karen yourself? This was more than just a case. It was a masterclass in why honesty matters, why threats should never be empty, and why Judge Judy's courtroom is where entitlement goes to die. Justice wasn't just served. It was delivered with surgical precision, broadcast to millions, and immortalized forever online. Karen walked in thinking she was untouchable. She walked out as a cautionary tale,